Elias Verus stood on the cracked, barren ground of the desolate planet, staring at the wreckage of his ship, the Vanguard. Once the pride of the human fleet, now it was just another abandoned relic, half buried in the dust of this forgotten world. His hands trembled as he tried to adjust the makeshift bandage on his side, blood seeping through the fabric. The wound wasn't life-threatening, but it was a reminder of how far he'd fallen. Once, he had been a captain in the Federation's military, respected, feared, a symbol of humanity's strength in a galaxy full of predatory races. But all that was gone now. Elias had been betrayed by those he trusted, framed for the failure of a crucial mission. A mission that, if successful, would have secured a new alliance with the Sothar Empire, one of humanity's greatest hopes for survival. Instead, he was accused of treason, a scapegoat for a failure not his own. His name had been tarnished beyond repair, his career shattered, and his people had turned their backs on him. The Federation had made sure of that. The higher-ups knew the truth but saw no advantage in defending him, so they cast him away like an unwanted tool, leaving him stranded here, on a remote world on the edge of known space. The artifact had been an accident. Elias had only stumbled upon it while searching for supplies, his body too weak to care much for the planet's mysteries. But something had pulled him in, like an invisible hand guiding his every move. The ruins where he found it, ancient, cold, and completely alien, were not just remnants of a dead race. They were a warning that something far more powerful than anything humanity had ever encountered lay dormant here, buried beneath layers of time and decay. The moment his fingers touched the stone, a surge of energy shot through his body, searing his skin, warping his senses. It felt like dying and being reborn at the same time, like his soul was being pulled apart and reassembled into something more. His vision blurred, his body trembled with an otherworldly power, and for the first time in months, Elias felt alive again, truly alive, like his veins were pumping fire instead of blood. He collapsed, unable to control the force coursing through him. When he awoke, the world around him seemed sharper, more vivid. He could hear the faint hum of distant machinery buried deep within the planet's crust. The sky above, though still dim and clouded, seemed brighter, the wind carrying with it whispers of something ancient and immense. That's when he understood. The artifact had chosen him. It was not a weapon, nor a relic, but a symbiotic organism, something alive, something intelligent, something that sought a host. And that host was him. In the days that followed, Elias experimented with his newfound abilities. His strength grew, his senses sharpened beyond human limits, and he could sense energy sources from miles away. His body healed at an accelerated rate, scars from old battles vanishing overnight. The artifact's presence in his mind was constant, like a quiet whisper, urging him to embrace its power fully, to use it for purposes beyond mere survival. But Elias hesitated. He knew that the galaxy didn't just view humanity as weak. It despised them, seeing them as insignificant ants beneath the feet of superior races. If the artifact's power could make him a god, what would that make the galaxy? And more importantly, what would it cost? His reverie was interrupted by a distant rumble. His eyes narrowed as he scanned the horizon. There, barely visible through the thick haze of the atmosphere, a massive warship appeared, a silhouette of dark metal against the swirling clouds. The Typhor. Elias recognized their ships immediately, a predator species, ruthless and unstoppable. They had been slowly advancing through human space, picking off colonies, systematically destroying anything that posed a threat to their imperial ambitions. They were here for Earth. And for some reason, they were coming for him too. Elias took a deep breath, the artifact's power thrumming inside him like a steady heartbeat. It was time to stop running. Humanity might have abandoned him, but he was about to show the galaxy what it had done. The rumble of the Typhor warship reverberated through the ground beneath Elias's feet, a grim reminder that he wasn't as alone as he had believed. It hovered ominously in the sky, its sleek, menacing form blocking out the weak sunlight. The Typhor didn't make mistakes. They were methodical, calculating, and ruthless. Their ships were capable of decimating entire fleets with ease, and their soldiers, creatures of unrelenting strength and cunning, could wipe out entire populations before their enemies even realized they were under attack. Elias's eyes narrowed. This wasn't a random encounter. The Typhor were here for him, and it was no coincidence. He could feel it in the air, the hum of something far more dangerous than just a military invasion. The artifact inside him pulsed, as if responding to the threat. He didn't know why, but he knew that the Typhor had sensed the artifact's reawakening, and they were determined to seize it or destroy him. He didn't have time to waste. His first instinct was to flee, to find shelter and regroup. But the artifact's presence in his mind refused to let him hide. Its influence had already begun to reshape him, making him think bigger, act faster, become something beyond human limitations. The alien intelligence inside the artifact whispered again, urging him to fight, to rise up and take command. He had power now, more than he had ever imagined, and the galaxy would never see him as weak again. But power came with a price. He couldn't forget the flicker of doubt he had felt earlier, the nagging voice in his mind that reminded him of the dangers of embracing the artifact completely. He had already felt its hunger, its insatiable thirst for control, for domination. Would he lose himself to it, just as he had lost his humanity? Would he become a puppet of its will? Elias shook his head. There was no room for indecision now. The Typhor were closing in, and they would stop at nothing to destroy everything he had left. Earth, the very people who had cast him aside. His thirst for vengeance, for justice, grew stronger than the pull of the artifact. It was his only way forward. In a blur of motion, he activated the emergency communication system hidden within the wreckage of his ship. It was an old model, far from reliable, but it was his last link to the outside universe. He patched through to the only person who might still care, Captain Ilara Voss. The screen flickered to life, revealing her face, hardened by years of exile and warfare. She had been one of the few who had stood by him, who had believed in his innocence, and now she was the last ally he had. "Ilara, it's me," Elias said, his voice low but urgent. Her eyes widened in recognition. "Elias, how are you?" "Cut the pleasantries," he interrupted. "The Typhor are coming. They found me. They'd know about the artifact." Ilara's face hardened, and the light of the monitor revealed the worry etched on her features. "Damn it, we need to move. Where are you?" "I'll get a strike force to you right away." "I don't need a strike force," Elias said, his eyes locked onto the looming ship in the distance. "I need you to listen. The Typhor aren't just after me. They're coming for Earth. They've already begun their invasion." Silence hung between them. Ilara's expression softened as she processed the gravity of his words. "How do you know this?" Elias glanced at the warship, a dark shadow against the stormy sky. "Because they've come for me. And I'm the only one who can stop them." Ilara hesitated. "You're not the only one who can fight, Elias. We're out there, too. We'll help you." The screen crackled. Elias's hand gripped the console tighter. The artifact's power surged within him, demanding action. The urgency in his voice grew, mixed with the strange calm that came with the artifact's influence. "The galaxy thinks humanity is weak, Ilara. They'll never respect us until we show them what we're capable of. I'll stop them, but you need to prepare Earth. The Typhor won't stop until they've erased us from existence." "Understood," she said quietly, determination settling in her eyes. "We'll meet you at Earth. But you—" "I know," Elias interrupted. "I'm not the man I was, but I will be the one who saves humanity. They will see us as more than just an afterthought." The transmission cut off, leaving Elias alone with the hum of the artifact inside him. His mind buzzed with possibilities. This was it. No more hiding, no more running. The galaxy was about to witness a revolution, and it would start with him. With a final glance at the Typhor warship in the distance, Elias stood tall, his heart pounding in his chest. He was no longer an outcast. He was a force to be reckoned with. The war for humanity's future had begun. As Elias's fleet made its way through the vast emptiness of space toward Earth, he could feel the weight of destiny pressing down on him, suffocating in its intensity. His ragtag armada was a motley collection of ships, survivors, rebels, outcasts, those who had nothing left to lose, but who were now united by a single cause. He had led them with ruthless efficiency, yet still, there was an unsettling quiet among the crew. Despite their shared mission, a sense of distrust lingered in the air, thick and palpable. They had never truly believed in him. Not yet. He was still the exiled captain, the traitor, the one who had been abandoned by his own people. How could they believe in him now when he was no longer fully human? The artifact pulsed beneath his skin, its presence always there, a constant reminder of what he had become. His transformation had been rapid, violent. His mind had expanded, gaining knowledge and capabilities far beyond human limits. But with that growth came a hunger, a gnawing, insatiable desire for more. It was hard to resist, and though he fought it, Elias knew deep down that he was no longer the man he had once been. The crew felt it, too. There were murmurs in the halls, glances exchanged in the shadows. Some feared him, others simply didn't trust him. Yet, in battle, when the time came, they would follow him without question. His tactics were flawless, his ability to outthink the enemy unparalleled. They couldn't deny his skill, his brilliance, but it was hard to ignore the strange aura that surrounded him now, like a storm waiting to break. And break it would. The Typhor were not known for mercy, nor for giving their enemies time to prepare. Elias knew they were on Earth's doorstep, that the clock was ticking, and every moment they spent in transit was another moment that humanity remained at the mercy of an unstoppable force. He couldn't afford hesitation. He had to strike before the Typhor could mobilize their full fleet. His fleet was still small, but its stealth capabilities, honed through years of evasion and exile, gave them a critical edge. As they neared Earth's orbit, Elias called a meeting in the war room. The air was thick with tension as the senior officers, many of whom had fought alongside him during his time in the Federation, assembled around the table. Captain Ilara Voss had arrived ahead of them with her own strike team, but her fleet was still scattered, small ships with limited firepower, unable to engage the Typhor head-on. "We're going to need more than guerrilla tactics to take them down," Ilara said, her tone a mix of urgency and frustration. "The Typhor are already mobilizing, and they've started laying waste to colonies in the Outer Rim. Earth is next. We don't have the numbers to fight a full-scale invasion." Elias leaned forward, the energy from the artifact thrumming inside him. It was not just a whisper anymore. It was a call. The more he listened, the more he understood. The artifact had its own agenda. It wanted war. It wanted conquest. And Elias could feel it pushing him forward, urging him to embrace the galaxy's chaos. "We don't need more numbers," Elias said, his voice calm, almost detached. "We need precision." The room went silent. The officers exchanged wary glances, sensing the subtle shift in his demeanor. He wasn't the Elias they remembered. The power emanating from him was undeniable, and his confidence, no, his certainty, sent chills down their spines. "Ilara, I know you've been gathering intelligence on the Typhor's command structure," Elias continued. "Tell me where their leadership is based. We hit them there. We cripple their ability to coordinate their forces." Ilara frowned. "You're suggesting an assassination on their homeworld." "No," Elias corrected, leaning back in his chair. "I'm suggesting we disrupt their central communications hub. We don't need to kill their leaders. We need to isolate them, cause confusion, disarray. If we can sever their coordination, we buy Earth enough time to mobilize its defenses." Ilara crossed her arms. "You're talking about a strike into the heart of Typhor territory. That's a suicide mission. Even with your abilities, Elias, we can't pull it off alone." "We don't need to pull it off alone," Elias said, his voice colder now, his eyes gleaming with the glint of something more dangerous. "The galaxy's races have long underestimated humanity. But if we can deliver a blow they don't expect, we'll shatter their arrogance. I've seen how they view us. They see us as nothing more than vermin." Ilara studied him closely, the suspicion in her eyes beginning to give way to something else. Realization. "You've seen it, haven't you? The future. You're not just doing this for humanity, are you? You've tasted what it could mean to wield the artifact's power. You're thinking bigger than just saving Earth." Elias didn't answer immediately. The artifact pulsed again, louder this time, as though agreeing with her assessment. He could feel its power surging within him, promising him everything. He didn't just want to save humanity anymore. He wanted to rule it. "The galaxy will never respect humanity until we make them fear us," Elias said finally, his voice low and deadly. "And we will make them fear us." As the crew exchanged uneasy looks, a quiet certainty settled over Elias. The storm was coming, and he was ready to unleash it. The fleet moved silently through the void, a shadow on the edge of the galaxy's awareness. Elias's plan had been set into motion, and as they neared the heart of Typhor space, the tension aboard the ships was palpable. Crew members worked with grim determination, but there was an underlying fear in their movements, a fear of the unknown, of Elias's newfound power, and of the mission that would determine humanity's fate. Elias, for his part, felt calm. The artifact's influence had grown stronger with every passing hour, its whispers louder, more insistent. But beneath it all, he could feel something else, a growing sense of purpose, something deeper than the artifact's thirst for domination. For the first time since he had been cast out, Elias felt a connection to something greater than himself, humanity. The very thing he had been cast aside from was now the reason he fought. Yet even as he clung to that ideal, Elias knew what the artifact's true nature was. It was power, raw and unfiltered, a force of the cosmos itself. It had no loyalty, no allegiance, only an insatiable hunger. And Elias understood. The longer he embraced it, the more of himself he would lose. He couldn't let it consume him. Not yet. He glanced at the holomap on the bridge, studying the Cypher's main base of operations. The data they had gathered indicated that the Cypher's command center was located on a massive, heavily fortified space station nestled inside an asteroid field. The station was shielded by layers of military defenses, its exact location constantly shifting within the asteroid's complex gravitational patterns. It was a perfect fortress, impervious to standard assaults. But Elias had never been one to follow the standard. He stood before the war room, his officers gathered around him, eyes sharp, filled with uncertainty and resolve. "Ilara," he said, his voice a steady pulse in the silence. "Are your ships ready?" Captain Ilara Voss stepped forward, her face tight with suppressed emotion. "We're ready, but this will be a nightmare. The asteroid field is crawling with Cypher scouts. If we're detected, we'll be torn apart before we can reach the station." Elias turned to the tactical display, his mind calculating, a part of him already shifting toward the next step. The artifact pulsed again, an almost unbearable pressure in his skull. He fought the sensation, but it was becoming harder to ignore. "We won't be detected," he said, a dangerous glint in his eyes. "We'll use the terrain against them. We know the asteroid field better than they do." The crew looked at him, unsure of how to take his words. They had only ever fought from a place of weakness, forced to evade or delay. Now, with Elias at the helm, there was a shift, an edge to his voice that seemed to promise victory, even in the face of overwhelming odds. "We'll move in, slip through their radar net, and strike directly at their communications hub," Elias continued. "Once we sever their ability to coordinate, their defenses will fall apart. We need to move quickly, strike hard, and leave before they can regroup." "But Elias," Ilara began, her voice laced with caution, "you're talking about hitting their heart, but their heart is in the middle of a war zone. The Typhor won't hesitate to launch a full-scale retaliation. We'll have moments, maybe minutes, before reinforcements arrive. I'm aware of the risks. Elias cut her off, his voice unwavering. And I'll take full responsibility for the consequences. Ilara studied him for a moment, then nodded. Understood. We move on your command. The meeting ended quickly, and the fleet went into silent preparation. Elias stood at the helm of his ship, the Vanguard, gazing out at the dark, shifting shadows of the asteroid field. His breath came steady, his senses heightened. The hum of the artifact inside him was louder now, almost deafening, as though it was urging him to give in to its power, to embrace the full extent of what he had become. The lines between Elias and the artifact were blurring, and he wasn't sure how much of himself he had left. With a final glance at the battlefield ahead, Elias gave the order. Move out. The fleet slipped into the asteroid field, using the jagged terrain to cloak their approach. The Typhor, still unaware of the danger, continued their patrols in their customary arrogance. They had underestimated humanity once, and they would do so again, at their peril. Elias's ship, along with Ilara's, wove through the field with uncanny precision, avoiding the deep scans and the swarms of Typhor drones patrolling the area. They moved like phantoms, the only signs of their passing the faint shimmer of distortion in the ship's wake, a temporary ghost left behind in their wake. Elias could feel the pulse of the artifact guiding him, sharpening his instincts. He could hear the slightest hum of engines, the subtlest movements, even in the silence of space. It was as if the cosmos itself had opened to him, showing him the paths others couldn't see. Minutes passed, and soon the Typhor station loomed ahead. An imposing structure, its massive form surrounded by an impenetrable web of defense shields and sentry ships. The asteroid field offered little cover now, and it was clear that they had reached the point of no return. If they were spotted, the entire mission would fail. But Elias didn't hesitate. Now, he commanded, his voice cutting through the tension. The fleet surged forward, breaking through the asteroid field in a blaze of calculated aggression. Their ships dropped out of stealth, weapons primed, and the first shots rang out as they engaged the Typhor defenses head-on. The galaxy would remember this moment. No longer would humanity be the hunted. Now, they were the hunters. The moment the fleet broke from the asteroid field, chaos erupted. The Typhor defense systems, long prepared for ambushes, but never quite expecting an assault so direct, snapped to life with brutal efficiency. Shields flared, and salvos of plasma fire streaked toward the human ships. But Elias had anticipated this. His fleet moved in synchronized precision, dodging blasts with expert evasions as their ships returned fire with deadly accuracy. The battle raged in the cold expanse of space, but the Vanguard and its allies danced with an almost supernatural grace, each ship seeming to know the other's next move before it happened. The Typhor were fierce warriors, but they had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt and innovate in the heat of battle. Elias's mind, sharpened and enhanced by the artifact, saw patterns others couldn't, flickers of movement that seemed almost imperceptible to the untrained eye. Every move felt like an extension of his own body. He could hear the hum of the artifact as it fed him information, guiding his decisions, suggesting attacks, and bolstering his focus. It was as though the universe itself had opened up to him. He saw more than just the battlefield. He saw the weaknesses, the tiny fractures in the Typhor's defenses, the cracks where their arrogance had left them vulnerable. His pulse quickened, the feeling of power coursing through him like a tidal wave. The sensation was intoxicating, a rush of energy that pushed him to act faster, hit harder, be bolder. He fought on the edge of control, and yet, with every moment, the artifact's influence tightened its grip, urging him to push beyond what was humanly possible. Launch the strike team. Elias barked, his voice cutting through the din of the war room. Ilara's voice crackled over the comms, full of determination. The team is ready, Captain. We're moving in. A squadron of human strike ships peeled off from the main fleet, heading toward the Sci-Fi command center. These ships, equipped with specialized stealth tech and high-powered cloaking devices, could slip through the enemy's shields unnoticed if they could make it through the barrage of Sci-Fi interceptors. As the strike force hurtled through the chaos of battle, Elias kept a steady eye on the comms. The Sci-Fi were clearly on the back foot, struggling to recalibrate after the human attack had taken them by surprise. But they weren't down for long. Reinforcements were already on the way. A flotilla of Sci-Fi warships, their massive forms descending from deeper into their territory. The humans' window of opportunity was closing fast. "Stay sharp," Elias muttered to himself, the artifact's power buzzing in his veins. "We've got one shot at this." The Sci-Fi's central station loomed ahead, a metallic colossus surrounded by a maze of shields and drones. The human strike ships, their cloaking devices active, slipped through the outer perimeter undetected, dodging patrols and defensive pulses. They were seconds away from their target when a massive explosion ripped through the vicinity, a ripple in space as a new, unidentified force appeared out of nowhere. A huge flagship, its black hull rippling with dark energy, materialized just outside the Sci-Fi station's defenses. It was a warship unlike anything the humans had seen, a ship so massive that its presence seemed to warp space itself. The Sci-Fi had reinforcements, yes, but they hadn't expected this. The flagship belonged to the Sothar Empire. Elias's heart skipped a beat. The Sothar were not allies of humanity, not by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, they had often been seen as enemies, at least on the fringe of the Federation's diplomacy. But there they were, appearing in the middle of a battle humanity had no hope of winning without them. The Sothar's intentions were unclear, but their arrival had shifted the balance of power in an instant. The Sci-Fi fleet reacted with immediate fury, launching a barrage of firepower at the new threat. But the Sothar flagship effortlessly absorbed the fire, its dark energy shields deflecting the plasma blasts as though they were nothing more than raindrops. Smaller ships, sleek and lethal, poured from the flagship's hangars and engaged the Sci-Fi forces with ruthless precision. "Captain, what are your orders?" Elias's voice crackled through the comms. Elias paused, his mind racing. The artifact, always present, urged him to act, to seize control, to take advantage of this new development. The Sothar had arrived, and they were on the verge of shifting the course of this war. This could be the turning point humanity needed, but only if he played his cards carefully. With the battlefield erupting into full-scale chaos, Elias made his decision. "We take advantage of the confusion. We push forward. Focus everything on the station. We'll cripple their command, and when their leaders are isolated, we'll force them to surrender." Ilara didn't hesitate. On it. As the human fleet surged forward, Elias felt the artifact surge within him, its power amplifying his every decision, every movement. The Sothar, their motivations still unclear, kept the Sci-Fi distracted, their ships cutting through the chaos like blades. The humans, more determined than ever, pressed on toward their target, the heart of the Sci-Fi war machine. The fight was far from over, but the tide had already begun to turn. Humanity was no longer the underdog. Elias Varus and his fleet were ready to take their place among the stars. The battle raged on, chaos now swirling around the human fleet as the Sothar flagship loomed overhead, its presence like a dark cloud casting a shadow across the battlefield. The Sci-Fi were caught in a frenzy of retaliation, their once impressive formations now scattered and disorganized in the face of this new threat. Elias could feel the pulse of the artifact within him, the power humming in his blood, and it urged him forward, pushed him into the heart of the storm. The human strike team had already penetrated the outer defenses of the Sci-Fi command station. Elias knew this was the critical moment. If they could cripple the central communications array, they would sever the Sci-Fi's command structure, leaving them vulnerable to attack from all sides. He had planned it meticulously, but now, with the Sothar intervening, the situation was more volatile than ever. The arrival of the Sothar could be an advantage, but it could also be a complication. Elias couldn't afford hesitation. "Push forward," he barked, his voice cutting through the comms with steely resolve. "Ilara, take the lead with your ships. We need that station disabled now." Captain Voss didn't need to be told twice. Her fleet surged forward, weaving through the Typhor defenses, launching missiles that detonated in quick succession, sending shockwaves through the enemy's ranks. The Typhor were scrambling, trying to reorganize, but the humans were relentless. The Typhor's arrogance had led them to believe they were untouchable, that their technology and tactics were superior. But in that moment it was clear their reign was coming to an end. As the human forces pushed toward the command station, Elias could see the tide of the battle shifting. The Sothar were relentless, tearing through Typhor warships with their advanced weaponry. But Elias knew it wouldn't be long before the Typhor retaliated in full force. They would not be so easily defeated. On the surface of the command station, Typhor warriors prepared to mount a defense, and Elias knew that they would be formidable. The Typhor had always been brutal, their combat tactics ruthless. But he had something they didn't: humanity's adaptability. The humans didn't rely on brute force alone. They relied on innovation, cunning, and unity. The artifact had given him an edge, yes, but it was his human ingenuity that would win the day. The strike force, led by Ilara's ships, broke through the station's outer defenses. Explosions echoed as the crew of the Vanguard and their allies navigated the corridors, neutralizing Typhor guards, disabling security systems, and planting charges on key targets. Elias's mind, sharper than ever, guided them with perfect precision. He saw the layout of the station in his mind's eye, every step, every twist of the corridors, every potential ambush laid out before him. The central communications hub was within reach. Charge set, Ilara's voice echoed over the comms. "We've got 5 minutes before detonation." Elias's pulse quickened. The artifact inside him surged again, a reminder of how far he had come, of what he had become. A part of him felt the temptation to unleash it fully, to use its power to wipe out the Typhor in a single stroke. The thought flickered through his mind, brief but intoxicating. But another part of him, his humanity, the part that had never fully abandoned him, fought to stay grounded. He had come this far by relying on his crew, his ingenuity. The artifact had its place, but it was not his master. He turned to the holomap. The Typhor reinforcements were arriving faster than expected. The Sothar flagship was still holding the line, but Elias could see the signs of strain. The Typhor were regrouping, pushing back against the unexpected assault. It would only be a matter of time before their full fleet arrived and overwhelmed the Sothar. The communication hub was their only chance. "Ilara, we're clear for detonation," Elias said, his voice steady. "Get out of there. Now. Don't wait for me." "Understood," she replied, and the comms crackled with the sound of retreating footsteps. Elias remained focused, his mind working quickly. The countdown was on. He needed to be sure the charges had hit the heart of the station's command. One misstep, 1 second of hesitation, and that Typhor could recover. He turned toward the airlock, moving with deadly precision, his heart pounding in his chest. Then a warning flashed across his display. An incoming enemy force, larger than any he had anticipated. The Typhor were throwing everything they had left at the humans. His moment of opportunity was closing rapidly. But Elias wasn't ready to retreat. Not yet. A dangerous glint flickered in his eyes as the artifact inside him pulsed in response, its dark energy calling out to him, urging him to act. "Everyone, get clear," Elias ordered. "I'll handle this." He strode forward, alone, into the depths of the station. The artifact's power rippled around him, amplifying his every step. As the first wave of Typhor warriors came into view, their eyes widened in surprise. They had never expected this. A single human, pushing into their heart of power. But Elias wasn't just a man anymore. He was something more. With a wave of his hand, The energy from the artifact surged, crackling in the air as it ripped through the Kyphor with terrifying efficiency. The walls shook as their defensive systems flickered and failed, unable to counter the force that Elias wielded. But he wasn't just destroying. He was calculating, cutting through the Kyphor with surgical precision, ensuring that each blow landed where it mattered most. The countdown was almost over. He could feel it. This was the moment. With a final decisive move, he deactivated the core defenses of the station. The entire complex hummed, and then the explosion was deafening. The station shook, its systems failing as the communications hub collapsed in on itself. Elias stood amidst the chaos, breathing hard, the weight of his actions settling over him. The tide of the war had turned. But the artifact was still there, ever present, its hunger never fully sated. And Elias knew this was only the beginning. The silence after the explosion was deafening. Elias stood among the wreckage of the Sci-Fi command station, the air heavy with the remnants of fire and metal. The blast had obliterated the heart of their operations, leaving nothing but a shattered, dying husk behind. The Sci-Fi were reeling from the loss of their communications and command structure, their war efforts now fragmented. The human fleet, still pressing forward, was already capitalizing on the confusion, sweeping through the remaining Sci-Fi defenses like a storm. But Elias, standing alone in the aftermath, felt the weight of it all settle in his chest. The artifact's power still pulsed within him, urging him onward, feeding the fire of conquest and ambition. It whispered in his ear, coaxing him to claim more, to crush the Sci-Fi completely. Every cell in his body screamed for him to use it, to let it consume him and finish what he had started. But Elias resisted. He could feel the corruption of the artifact gnawing at his soul, its whispers growing louder, more insistent. The power it offered was intoxicating, but he knew that every time he gave in, he lost a piece of himself. Humanity had always been about balance, strength and weakness, creation and destruction, and Elias couldn't afford to tip the scales too far in favor of the artifact's insatiable hunger. The comms crackled, breaking his reverie. "Captain, you did it. The station's gone. The Sci-Fi are in disarray. We've taken down their fleet." It was Ilara's voice, steady but filled with the kind of relief that could only come after a hard-fought victory. "Good," Elias said, though his voice carried an edge of something darker. "But we're not done yet. The Sothar have made their move. We can't trust them. Not yet." Ilara paused before replying. "Understood. But what now?" "We've shattered their command, Elias. The Sci-Fi won't be able to regroup quickly. It's our chance." Elias stared out into the void, where the remnants of the battle still flickered in the distance, broken Sci-Fi warships drifting in the wake of their destruction, scattered pieces of shattered hulls floating like the aftermath of a great storm. The fleet had struck fast, caught their enemies off guard, and torn apart their network in a matter of hours. But the Sothar flagship still hovered ominously at the edge of the battlefield, its presence like a looming shadow. The Sothar hadn't fired on the humans, not yet, but their arrival had changed the dynamics. The Sothar weren't allies, not by any means. They were a force unto themselves, with their own goals and motives. They were never ones to help without expecting something in return. Elias knew it. "We move fast," Elias said, snapping out of his thoughts. "Prepare the fleet to retreat to a safe distance. The Sci-Fi are beaten for now, but we can't afford to linger. We need to get back to Federation space before the Sothar make their move. I won't risk everything for an uncertain ally." "But we still need to know what the Sothar are after," Ilara said, concern creeping into her voice. "If we don't find out, we'll be blind." "I'll deal with them," Elias responded, his voice colder than ever. He didn't know how he would handle the Sothar yet, but he knew one thing. They wouldn't be allowed to stand in the way of humanity's survival. No one would. As he gave the order for the fleet to begin its retreat, Elias's mind raced with possibilities. The Sothar might have saved humanity in the short term, but they had their own plans. They were ruthless, and their long-term goals were unknown. If they wanted to claim the spoils of war, they would have to face Elias and his crew first. He wouldn't let the galaxy slip back into the hands of another empire, not when humanity had earned its place among the stars. Suddenly, the comms flared to life again, this time with a more urgent tone. "Elias, you need to see this." He turned to face the screen in the command center, where a fleet of Sothar ships had just launched from their flagship. But it wasn't the movement of ships that caught his attention. It was the message being broadcast on every frequency. A single figure appeared on the screen, a tall, imposing Sothar leader, their features obscured beneath the hood of an elaborate, ceremonial cloak. Their voice, deep and commanding, sent a chill through Elias's bones. "Human," the Sothar leader's voice reverberated through the comms. "You have proven your worth in battle, but do not think for a moment that your victory over the Typhor has gone unnoticed. We offer you a choice. Align with us, and together we will reshape the galaxy, or face the consequences of your defiance." Elias's grip tightened on the console, his eyes narrowing. The Sothar were no longer playing games. This was no mere political maneuver. They were making a declaration. Their power was absolute, their motives unclear, and their intentions ominous. But Elias was no stranger to power struggles. He had been cast aside, exiled from the Federation, left to fight for scraps. And now he stood at the precipice of something far greater. The Sothar wanted him to join them, to bow to their vision of the galaxy. Elias chuckled, a dark laugh that echoed through the room. "I think you've misjudged me." He glanced at Elara, her face unreadable, but her eyes locked onto his with a quiet understanding. The Sothar had made their move, but Elias had a choice now, to submit or to stand against them. And as the artifact within him whispered of untold power, Elias knew one thing for certain. The true battle was just beginning. "Prepare for war," he said, his voice low and filled with determination. "We're not joining them. We're going to take the galaxy for ourselves." The message from the Sothar leader hung in the air like a weight, pressing down on everyone in the command room. The fleet's hum seemed distant, muted, as Elias's mind raced. The Sothar had made their offer clear. They wanted humanity to bend to their will, to become a cog in their vast, ruthless empire. But Elias could feel the artifact's hunger stirring, urging him to take control of the situation, to assert dominance. It was a tempting whisper, an intoxicating pull toward power that promised an easy way to crush the Sothar and claim what was rightfully his. But as the message ended, Elias's focus sharpened. The galaxy wasn't a chessboard for anyone to dominate, least of all the Sothar. The humans had fought too hard to be free of the shackles of empires, and Elias would not bow to another. Humanity's place in the stars would be forged by their own hands, not bought with submission. "We will not yield," Elias said, his voice like steel. "Prepare the fleet. Get me every available resource. We'll show the Sothar what happens when they underestimate us." Elara's voice crackled over the comms, cutting through the tense silence. "Elias, we're still recovering from the battle. We're far from full strength, and the Sothar are not a force we can take lightly. They've already established their dominance over entire sectors. We need to think this through." Elias's grip tightened around the console, his knuckles white. He understood the danger, but his resolve was unwavering. He knew that if humanity was to thrive, it couldn't afford to be subjugated. The Sothar may have the upper hand in terms of sheer power, but they didn't have what the humans possessed: ingenuity, resilience, and the drive to create something greater than themselves. "I don't need to think it through," Elias replied. "We don't have the luxury of time, Elara. We strike first. We show the galaxy what happens when the Sothar try to play God." The screen in front of him flickered as a strategy map of the galaxy appeared. The Sothar's territory stretched across the rim of human space, a vast, dark expanse of star systems under their control. But Elias's eyes narrowed as he scanned the map. There were gaps in their defenses, vulnerabilities he could exploit. The Sothar had made the mistake of underestimating humanity's ability to adapt and innovate. A plan began to form in his mind, one that would stretch the human fleet to its limits, but give them a fighting chance. The Sothar were formidable, but their arrogance would be their downfall. If they thought they could dominate humanity, they were sorely mistaken. Elias had already proven that he could defy the odds. This would be no different. "Move the fleet to the Arcanist sector," he ordered. "We'll use the gas clouds there for cover. I want a strike team prepared for sabotage. If we can take down their communications, we can cripple their command structure. Once that's done, we hit their supply lines and make them bleed." There was a moment of hesitation before Ilara responded. And after that, Elias's gaze hardened, the weight of his words settling on his shoulders like a mantle. "We make the Sothar regret ever thinking they could control us. If they want to take the galaxy by force, they'll have to get through us first." The fleet moved swiftly, with a quiet, calculated precision that only the human forces could manage. The Sothar were still distracted, still focused on their own dominance, which gave the humans a small window to strike. They would be caught off guard. It was a risk, but it was one Elias was willing to take. As the fleet neared the Arcanist sector, Elias felt the familiar hum of the artifact within him, the cold energy pulsating through his veins. The power was undeniable, and yet, for the first time since its arrival, Elias felt a twinge of uncertainty. Was this the right path? Was he becoming too consumed by it? The voice of the artifact echoed in his mind, soothing, seductive. "You are the Dark Messiah. The universe belongs to you. All that you desire can be yours. Take it." Elias gritted his teeth, pushing the voice away. He had come too far to lose himself now. The artifact was a tool, nothing more. It would serve his will, not the other way around. His humanity had to remain intact, or the war would be lost before it even began. Ready for the strike, Ilara reported as the fleet dropped out of FTL travel and into the dense gas clouds of the Arcanist sector. The silence was almost eerie as the ships nestled within the swirling nebula, the stars above obscured by the thick fog of dust and gas. "Engage at my command," Elias said, his voice a quiet command. His mind was sharp, his resolve unwavering. The time for hesitation had passed. The Sothar would never expect this. An attack in the heart of their territory, so close to their supply lines, their communications, their power. It was the perfect strike, the perfect opportunity to turn the tide of war in humanity's favor. As the first wave of human ships darted out from the gas clouds, Elias's heart pounded in his chest. The battle ahead would be fierce, and there was no turning back. But with every passing moment, he felt the surge of humanity's will behind him, felt the weight of 1,000 generations on his shoulders. This was no longer just a fight for survival. It was a fight for the future, a future where humanity would rise, not just as survivors, but as rulers of their own destiny. The war for the galaxy had begun, and Elias Verus would lead humanity to victory, no matter the cost.